Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you again. I know I was on the session yesterday afternoon. I wasn't on this morning. I hope that these sessions are doing what we had hoped they would do, is start kind of filling in some information and connecting the dots to launch your practicum experience in a stronger way this year. So I know yesterday was about expectations. This morning you talked about liaisons and the role of the liaison. That's your external person, support person to your placement. And we are going to talk this afternoon about your practicum instructor, who is your internal person. So um, before I begin, we get this question frequently. All of these sessions are being recorded. They will be uploaded into your associated Canvas page, whether it's 4998 or 7998. Dr. Carr will send an email when they are available. So if you missed any of the sessions, you can go in at that point and see the recording. And if you want credit for the hours of that, complete a little quiz on the back end and you're good to go. So I am going to pull up my slides and um, we will get going here. I know yesterday afternoon, because I wasn't facilitating, I was able to kind of answer questions in the chat. I don't know that I can talk and do that at the same time. So feel free to put questions in the chat. And when all is said and done, if we haven't answered your question, we can circle back to answer them. So welcome to the Tuesday afternoon boot camp session on how to work with your practicum instructor in self-advocacy. We've put these slides together to kind of guide our conversation in a loose kind of way. So the, the next one, this is we're going to do some welcome and some introductions. We're going to talk about, okay, what is a practicum instructor? What is a task supervisor? The importance of communication, supervision, which I'm sure you've heard about more than once so far, but that's how important that is. Your assignments, evaluations, and self-advocacy with the lens of how these interact with you and your practicum instructor. So with that, we'll go to introductions. As most of you know, I'm Dr. Barbara Hughes, Assistant to the Director of Practicum Education for the MSW Foundation year students. I've worked very closely with you to get you placed for the coming year. I know Dr. Carr worked with the BSW students, and we're really excited for the year that you have ahead. And with me today is Carla Nichols, and I will let her introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Carlin Nichols, LMSW, Clinical and Macro Practice. I'm a field instructor for Wayne State School of Social Work, as well as University of Michigan. I'm Senior Director of Behavioral Health Services at CNS Healthcare, serving Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County. And I am a Wayne State School of Social Work grad and happy to be here.
Bonus points. Thanks for being here. And kind of like your morning session for the students, we wanted to bring in not just us as staff, but somebody um, who has served in the roles that we're talking about. So this morning, I know you had a liaison with Dr. Carr, and this afternoon we've got Carlin coming in as a seasoned practicum instructor, so that she can kind of speak to, from her perspective, how these issues present and how best to address them. So with that, there is a bit of a description here. Practicum instructors are LMSWs. That's a requirement of our accrediting body. So your practicum instructor is the LMSW who will supervise you in your practicum, with their primary responsibility being educational. They have signed on to work with you to help you learn and grow in social work practice and understanding and values and ethics and all the competencies. And so it's very different from an internship, I call it, because internships, to me, you show up and do whatever they say. Practicums are educationally based. That learning plan that we're talking about to develop a plan to how you're going to achieve the competencies. And so we try to keep it in that educational realm. You're there to learn. You are not expected to know, but you will grow and know as you go on. But that's the official description of a practicum instructor. And then some of you might also have what we call a task supervisor. Sometimes students have a task supervisor, and that's a person who they might walk shoulder to shoulder with on a day-to-day basis. So Carlin might be your practicum instructor, if I could use that as an example, because she's the LMSW. She'll do the supervision, the evaluations, the feedback, all of that stuff. But she may have a colleague that she wants you to shadow or work with on a day-to-day basis. That's your task supervisor. So if you hear that term coming up, that's what that means. Um, Again, it's just another role that can be played, not necessarily, so nothing's wrong if you don't have one, but oftentimes we do, depending on the agency. So, Carlin, I'm going to have you, kind of kick this one off. We've talked about in other sessions the importance of communication, but, from the role of a practicum instructor, I'm wondering if you can start sharing some thoughts about, how that matters, how you've seen it play out
Yeah.
well, and how you've seen it not go so well, and what were the barriers, and what should students, be kind of paying attention to.
Yeah, you and I talk about this often. I'm a firm believer that communication can resolve so many issues, that all issues can be resolved through communication. That although and resolution, like I may not necessarily be happy, but we can get to some type of resolution. And one of the things that why I think is so important is because as social workers, we find ourselves being very, very busy. And all you know is what you know. And what I do know when I have a student is what they tell me. Everything from what days are you going to be on site? What days will you, if you have to leave early? And the need for more communication has heightened as our world has changed and we spend more time working remote. So being able to be sure that you have a line of communication to your practicum instructor and your your task supervisor becomes extremely important because they, in fact, are your lifeline when you're talking about your practicum. So everything from being clear about what your schedule is, being clear about where you're going to be, when you're going to be there. And because there's a lot of autonomy required when you're doing your practicum. As a practicum instructor, I provide the framework for the assignments and for the time, but there's a great deal of autonomy that students have in our world, and that's kind of heightened now that. So, for example, I'll have several Wayne State students. Few of them CNS where I am. I have four different locations where we provide children's services. I will have two students, and one is at Oakland University, one is Wayne State, who will be in Pontiac. My office is on the east side of Detroit. So, and they'll have a task supervisor. So I'll have to be in communication with that task supervisor. I'll have to be in communication with those two students. So finding ways to communicate becomes really important. What kind of tools? For example, I have another student who's going, a Wayne State student. She'll be with me on the east side. She's already looking for me, right? Here's my cell number. Always take my cell. This is the best way. Communicating the best way to that you like to be communicated with. Um, You'll have your Wayne State email address. Here's the thing that students sometimes forget. Now that you're in your practicum, you're going to get a whole new email address, guys. Your practicum instructor, your task supervisor, they're going to immerse you in the world of that organization. you are going to have to get used to using a whole nother email address. Are you going to tie that email address to your Wayne State or your Gmail or your Yahoo? Figuring those things out. Messages and information is coming to us quite a bit these days. So it's going to be important that you figure those things out. The other thing I think is important to think about is having a conversation with your practicum instructor about communication. What's your preferred method? What is their preferred method? Uh, so that you can be in agreement of what that looks like. Don't make any assumptions. Don't assume that because I sent an email to my practicum instructor at 10 p.m. at night that they got it. Don't do that. If they have a conversation, if they say, if it's after 5, just text me here, or you can put it on Teams. You'll find that too. There's a lot of find out what technology is being used at your field placement. Are they using Teams? Are they using Slack? What types of tools do they use? Understand the culture of your organization to also make sure that you know when to use it, when not to use it. Um, Again, I think the reason it matters, Dr. Hughes, is because of something that you said to begin with. Your practicum instructor is is your teacher, right? And so having a clear connection to communicate with them is important. Communicating your desires, your needs, what's going well, what's not going well, because that instructor's role is to guide you through the practice. I find sometimes that students may be even frustrated with how organizations function. Believe it or not, so are we. We're frustrated how organizations function. However, having practiced for 30 years, I understand how organizations function. And so, one of my roles as a practicum instructor is to help you process that. If you don't tell me you're frustrated, if you don't communicate the things you're struggling with, I can't help you process that, figure out what works, what doesn't work, because the thing about this whole topic, communication, one of the things you're working to do, and we probably come into our practicum thinking we have this thing figured out. One of the things we're working to do is figure out how we prefer to communicate, what works for us, what works for the people around me. How I communicate with Dr. Hughes is different than I communicate with Dr. Carr. And I'll tell you that to be the case because Dr. Hughes, she answers later in the day. I don't know if you guys notice that, but Dr. Carr, she'll answer quicker. I don't know. Am I wrong? No. So understanding your preferred method, neither one of them are wrong. That's just how they function. And understanding your own personal preferred method of communication, understanding how your task supervisor, your practicum instructor, your other colleagues at your placement communicate is something that you also are learning. I think oftentimes, Dr. Hughes, we have in our head that everybody communicate like we do, and that's not really the case. So the other thing I also want to point out is as it relates to communication is sharing your learnings, sharing what you're learning in the classroom, what you're learning from your other colleagues, what you're learning in the different spaces you find yourself in as a social work student, so that your practicum instructor or your task supervisor, and I'm really thinking of the practicum instructor too, because your task supervisor is the one that's going to walk one-on-one on with tasks, like Dr. Hughes said, shadow that person. Your practicum instructor is the one who's going to frame that for you as it relates to social work practice. So ensuring that you're not holding back when you're in relationship with them becomes really important. Dr. Hughes asked me to give an example of when it didn't work well. Um, so one of the things that I found more recent is students are where everybody's on the go, right? Students are no different than us who've been practicing for years. And people are more mobile. We're tied to communication. And I've had students that would just disappear on me, just disappear. Like where did they go? They would just, and they're just doing what they normally do. Something happened, and so now they're going from here to there. They leave for the day or whatever. And so I have a personal responsibility as the practicum instructor for that human being. They're my student. I'm there to provide them with guidance, support, structure, resources, all that stuff. Can't do that if I don't know where they went. So once a student got where they were supposed to go, or they were headed, I don't know where they were supposed to go, where they were headed, they reached out and said, "Oh, I left for the day. I didn't have anything else to do. I finished my assignment," whatever that was. And so that really doesn't work for me because not only do uh, you have expectations around the hours you're supposed to be here, we have those expectations are related back to your educational plan, the school's expectations of you, of me, all those types of things. So something as simple as that student, they felt like they finished their day. They finished their assignment. So they headed back home, all the way to Ann Arbor at the time. And everything was fine in their head. Carlin, that's me, I'm freaking out and panicking, like, where did they go? And that is something very simple that could have been handled with a text, because we're all super busy. I tend to prefer text. If you can't call me, you could call me, you could Teams me, you could text me and say, "Hey, Carlin, I'm done for the day. Is there anything else? If you don't mind, I have something going on. Can I leave?" That kind of thing, which seems like an easy fix, which is why I firmly believe, Dr. Hughes, all things can be resolved through communication. Let's talk about
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that I'm taking all kinds of notes so I can circle back. One of the things about communication is it's a form of accountability.
it. It is.
And that's what Carlin is referring to. And the instance she was referring to about the student who just disappeared, it was when I was field director at a different university. She called me one day. It's like, where is she? Like, where did she go? And I'm like, wait, is she not communicating with you? No. And so, the situation, the train had gone down the track quite a bit by the time that I jumped into that situation. And it took a lot to remediate it. So, um, I really want to emphasize, I often use the phrase, small fires are easier to put out than big fires. And
Yeah.
so the sooner you can bring anything to your practicum instructor's attention, if you're sick, if a family member is sick, if you do need to leave early, if you're going to be late, any of the above, and then some, communication is key. And starting out from the get-go, trying to establish what that pattern is for the two of you will really help as you go down the road. The other thing I thought about in terms of whatever the mechanism is for communicating with your practicum instructor, remember the expectations presentation yesterday about being respectful and professional. Um, I don't know about you, Carlin, but I tend to discourage students from saying, like, if I'm the practicum instructor, like, "Hey, Barbara." Um, and instead, Dr. Hughes or Professor Hughes, the more official or professional way to approach your practicum instructor. Another example I had is I had a practicum instructor call me and was like, "We have a problem. The student has been here, she's doing good work, But lately she's just been like referring to me by my first name or saying, hey, you, or things like just getting really um, loose about the communication with their practicum instructor. And you do get comfortable as you go along, that's for sure. But you want to make sure that you're still communicating in a respectful manner, even if you're upset. Um,
And I
so I
think
want,
that can be resolved by asking a question too. So many of you don't know, but I know Dr. Hughes and Dr. Carr and have known them for a while. I knew Dr. Carr before she was Dr. Carr. So when I see Dr. Carr out and about, I'm like, "Hey, Chandra, how you doing? Hey, Barbara, how you doing?" Not here, y'all. This is a completely different setting. Now, I have some I have some friends who will say, and Dr. Carr and Dr. Hughes are these people. It depends on the setting they're in. They'll simply say, just call me Barbara, whatever that is. You have to also understand the culture of the organization you're in too. How are people addressing people with particular titles, whether they're in leadership or they have advanced degrees? You can be in a school and everybody call you, you'll notice this in different cultures. A school setting, they'll call everybody Miss something, Mr. something. They call them by their last name with some type of what is that called? Doctor, Miss, Mr. I don't know what that's called, but you know what I'm talking about. A title.
Asian,
Oh,
so I don't know.
yeah. There are certain organizations too that part of part of their culture is to whenever you introduce yourself, you share your pronouns. So you got to pay attention to that and what is the culture of that organization and be respectful of that culture.
And it's a lot to get used to at the beginning, and just give yourself time and give yourself grace, and as you get more feet on the ground and time on your log, all of that will become clear to you. And when all else fails, ask questions.
Question. Perfect.
Questions. Yeah. All right. So let's move on to our next slide and see where this takes us. Oh, this is talking about that supervision piece. And I know we talked about it yesterday in the expectations one, but it continues to be something that needs to be highlighted because students have reported not getting it when they needed it. And so, again, it's one of those things that you try to establish at the beginning. It's like, I need an hour of supervision a week. What does that look like here? And agencies are going to differ. Some will say, like I've had students where they meet Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock from 9 to 10 every week. Boom, that is just supervision time. I've had others where it's a group supervision, like Carlin has students from other universities. She might set up a group supervision because she is a practicum instructor to several students. And there's real value in having that with students from other schools. It's really rich learning. Um, it could also be that you've got, a half hour of formal communication and a half hour of kind of as you go along. Like students have said, I'm in the car with my practicum instructor like 3 hours a day or whatever it is. And sometimes those can be opportunities. But the bottom line is to make sure that you are able to share what's going on in terms of your learning and your experiences, to ask questions, to process, to get advice, all of those things. And that's where the real learning comes in, when you can have that opportunity to mesh what you're learning in the classroom, what you're doing in your placement, and in a safe environment with the practicum instructor who has agreed to provide you with that.
I think one of the things to keep in mind is that, and I think one thing that often occurs to me, Dr. Hughes, is that some students see supervision as a burden or a chore. When I believe supervision to be one of the best opportunities I have as a practitioner to sit with someone else, more learned, more experienced, more insight, different perspective, whatever that may look like for you, at where you are in your profession because the supervision doesn't stop at all. I'm having supervision with my boss tomorrow. Is truly an opportunity to get what you need from someone else. In this instance, it's your practicum instructor. And being clear about what you want and what you need is also important. Remember, you're taking practicum is literally you're taking what you've learned and applying it right then, right there, real time in an organization. This is where you can really like hone your skills and abilities. And I'm the type of person that, and always have been, that I don't give my boss an out. I really don't. I've never have. Even as a student, it's like, okay, it's time for supervision. Where you at? I put it on their calendar. This is where I am. And I know self-advocacy is on your agenda, but this is one of those things that it may call for you to advocate for yourself to say, I need an hour of your time. The reality is that your practicum instructors, again, are just as busy as you are. And they chose to be practicum instructors for a reason. They know the expectations. They really want to give back to the university. They want to pour into their younger colleagues. So sometimes it just may take you being more assertive and saying, hey, how do we make this happen? Or being the one to put it on their calendar week to week or however that looks to make sure you get what you need.
Agreed. You know, thinking about all my years in practicum education, and that piece that Carlin was talking about, the practicum instructors love having students. They often say, "I love the energy they bring in. You know, fresh perspectives, fresh energy, and it really helps revitalize them at the same time." So. I know self-advocacy is something that you need to step into, even if it is a bit uncomfortable, because it's your learning, right? And you want to make sure you get the most out of it that you can. So let's see. Um, so your practicum instructor is also the person who is going to work with you on some of your practicum assignments. The first being your learning plan. That's the document, and it will be discussed in greater detail, I think Thursday morning. Um, if not tomorrow, I can't remember which one, but the practicum instructor is the one that works with you on that. You're walking into an agency and you're in a program you've not been in before, and you're tasked with filling out this really long document that covers 9 competencies. You don't know enough about the agency and what you'll be doing to be able to adequately fill that in. And so getting your practicum instructor or task supervisor involved in that planning process is going to be critical. Um, if that's not happening, be sure to advocate for yourself and ask them to step in. You could use supervision time to work on your learning plan. Again, they are acutely familiar with these kinds of things. They know that they have to exist, and I really encourage you to reach out and plan for that. They also give you the feedback on your process recordings. So you're going to be doing these every 2 weeks. You're going to do 5 process recordings in the fall and 5 in the spring at a clip of about every 2 weeks. Your practicum instructor is the one who is tasked with reading them, giving feedback, processing, so that you can continue to learn. Remember, this is a continuous learning process. You don't ever arrive. You're continually learning and growing. And feedback that we've gotten from students based on evaluation we did last year, it's like students don't mind doing them, but if you're not getting feedback, they're not helpful. It just feels like busy work. So it might be another area where you have to advocate for yourself. I don't know, Carlin, if you wanted to step in on either one of those, the learning plan or the process recordings.
Yeah, I think one of the thing about the learning plan, the first one as a field, sorry, I'm trying to get used to the language. Because when I go to Michigan, they make me use the other word. Um,
That's because they're not as evolved as we are.
no, they aren't. Go Warriors. Um, the first learning plan, don't worry if it doesn't feel heavy. Like, so we come into our practicum thinking I'm about to see all these clients and do all this stuff. Da, 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 da. And honestly, if it's your first time hitting the door of that organization, there are just some basics you need to know. You may spend your time training, you may spend your time understanding the organization. So keep in mind that that first learning plan may not feel as robust as you may think it will. And as time go on, your assignments will feel a lot heavier. The thing that I think about the process recordings, they do for students may feel a little redundant. And as a practicum instructor, is helpful to have a conversation. This goes back to that communication because sometimes students are like, what should I do my process recording on? Like, not really knowing what to process. And sometimes students are just, they're in the organization doing whatever they're doing, and they're not realizing, this to be so Dr. Hughes, they don't realize they're in the process of learning something as they're doing. They're like, they may be like, well, I just sat at this information booth at this community fair. What is that? Well, it's a great function for community outreach for that organization. Let's process that. So, one of the things I think is helpful is having a conversation with uh, your practicum instructor about what you're going to talk about. And then that way it'll get your kind of your juices flowing about this is what I'm gonna write about in my process recording. And as a practicum instructor, when I read it, I may not comment on everything. But it gives me some insight into the thinking of my student and where they are, and it also helps me personally when I get to also because they have assignments, it's linked back to that learning plan and supervision, where I've had students where I find that process recordings look like their students are just checking the box. Let me write this, let me write this, let me write this. And there's no depth to them. And process recordings are truly supposed to be a reflective activity. And because of reflection is a huge part of our practice as social workers.
Um, and someone just asked a question I put in the chat. There are examples of process recordings. This is an example of a learning plan on the web pages of the Practicum Education Office. So what you don't glean from this and the other sessions this week, everything we talk about is also on the website. So you can use that as a resource. Then the other thing is your practicum instructor is the one who will complete your midterm and final evaluations. You probably learned this morning that it's the liaison that assigns the grade, but it's the practicum instructor who does the evaluation. Then the liaison takes that and submits the grade. So it's a continuous process. At midterm, it's very simple. Are you making progress or are you not in these kind of basic areas? It's an opportunity to kind of check in to make sure you are starting to learn in the ways that we're hoping that you will be. And if you're not, that's a great opportunity to do a course correction and provide more learning opportunities so that you can do that. The one at the end of the semester, both semesters, is a much more extensive evaluation of the learning that you've done, the practice behaviors you've demonstrated based on the 9 competencies. But again, it's your practicum instructor that will complete that. And again, it could be done in supervision. You could review it and talk about it. But just know that that is initiated by the practicum instructor. Any feedback on that, Carlin?
I try to go on mute. No, I think that's definitely uh, good advice. The process recordings can really be an excellent tool to uh, for not just you, but also your practicum instructor to kind of hone in on areas to continue to focus on to support your growth over time.
And if you were on the session yesterday afternoon, you might have heard me say I did a training for the new practicum instructors last Wednesday, and I talked with them as well about process recordings and the importance of getting that feedback to the students so that you can continue to learn. Also talked with them about supervision. So the information is coming from many different directions, so that we're all on the same page moving forward. Okay, that's what I just talked about. Practicum instructors do the midterm and the final. I believe there are examples on our website if you wanted to go in and take a look at them. And then, self-advocacy, which we've kind of alluded to a couple of times. One of the things that I thought of, and we can open it up for conversation and questions also, but one of the things that I have heard, particularly at the beginning, students say, I'm just feels like I'm doing busy work. I'm not learning anything. I'm not doing anything. Um, and it kind of alludes to what Carlin was saying earlier. For a while, you just got to get in there and get a feel for the organization and how it flows and how they communicate and what they do and where they do it and how they do it and get a good working knowledge base of all of that. And it's just a continuous improvement process. You're not going to walk in the door and be given a client file and say, do a biopsychosocial assessment, right? You have to kind of grow with it. So, but if it's going too long and you truly feel like you're not getting the learning that you need, that's when you need to advocate for yourself in that supervision about what you're doing and share with them your concerns and what adjustments can be made or how can they help you understand.
I think also communicating what you want to learn. What do you expect to get out of it? One of the things I think is interesting, Dr. Hughes, is that students come with great ideas. This is what I want to learn. I want to learn. I want to learn how to do community organizing, whatever it is they say. And so me as the practicum instructor know that I'm getting them to that space. That I am going to get you if that's your focus and I'm your field instructor, field practicum instructor, I'm gonna get it right, Dr. Carr. I am going to get you somewhere where you're actually in the community, engaging people and doing those skills. But in order to get you there, you have to start somewhere first, you know? And you need to understand the context. If you're going to work with me, you need to understand CNS as an organization. You need to understand the different communities. There's so much to understanding. And this is the thing that I think makes social work unique in and of itself is that we spend a lot of time understanding the context of the work that we do before we jump in and decide we're going to be change makers. So that those first few months or so, although it may feel like you're not doing, the learning is the time that it takes to really do understand the culture and the context in which you're working.
That's a great point. And I thought of a couple of other things because we were talking about, it seemed like you were just saying, not enough for me to do. I don't feel like I'm learning. There's also the other end of the spectrum where students feel like they're getting buried in
Oh,
things and that there's too much, they're giving me too much work and I can't keep up. That's an opportunity for you to advocate for yourself and to talk with your practicum instructor and process that and see what adjustments can be made or how you can adapt. Um, Getting too much. Oh, I had a great thought. It'll come back to me.
yeah, I think speaking up for yourself is something that is really important because I don't think any of us as practicum instructors are looking to uh, give students too much. Um, Again, sometimes we move fast and the time this goes back to communication, Dr. Hughes. I may give an assignment and the student may say, I got it, and we ask questions and we process, but then the student doesn't have it, right? There's a lot of questions. And then you feel like you're underwater. How do I get this done? But without telling me, hey, this isn't working for me, I need something a little bit more. I have these questions that goes back, that kind of loops back to the supervision. You can't be afraid to say, I don't get it. I don't understand. What are you asking me to do? Those types of things. Being willing, being open to learning is the other, it's kind of a part of self-advocacy, I believe. And one of the other things I think is worth considering is bringing whatever it is you're working in your classroom, your coursework into field two. So this may not seem like self-advocacy, but it is. Say you're in a class and you have to do an assessment. I need to do an assessment of a client. And you're in an organization with clients. Self-advocacy is saying, hey, I have this assignment and I'd like to do it here. Can I do that? Versus trying to figure something out, working one-on-one with your field instructor to make some of those assignments work becomes really important because you'll have a lot of stuff like that. And you have a great resource in your practicum that has clients, it's in the community, it's an organization, like all things social work is right there for you.
Yeah, and that was a point that I was going to make as well, is that you're going to have assignments in your classes as well, not only your process recordings and things you're going to need to see, but you're going to have assignments, and practicum instructors don't necessarily know that. And so um, the sooner you bring it to their attention, the more helpful they can be in helping you identify how that can be completed at the agency. Don't- Oh, yeah, this was the other thing. I had referred to the website, but on the website, there also is a practicum education manual. And so everything we do and why we do it and how we do it is in that manual. In addition to the links to training videos and resources and examples of documents. As you find yourself asking questions that you don't know the answer to, I would recommend that should be your first place to go to see if you can't find it in that. It's a very helpful space, and I believe it can help answer most, if not all, of your questions if you take the time to peruse through that. So at this point, we are at the point of just fielding some questions that you have. I know that Dr. Carr and I have been responding through the chat over the course of this session, but let's open it up to everybody else. I'll stop sharing and let us know how we can help you.
So with the learning plan, I know that it's not uploaded yet into IPT, but once it is and we start talking to our advisors about it or sit down and start working on it, I know that it's due September 20th. We're uploading it to you along with to our
You're uploading it
advisor.
into you're uploading it into IPT.
Right.
Yeah.
That's when I say you, I mean I'm
Oh,
uploading it to IPT
yeah.
and then my advisor is also going to have a copy of it.
So everybody who is connected to you, whether it's your practicum instructor or your liaison, can look at your learning document in IPT. Yes.
Okay.
They're the ones that are going to be working directly with you on that.
Okay.
I do feel that these boot camp videos and meetings are helpful because I attempted last year a field placement didn't go well, and I knew none of this. I could have made it go better had I
Yeah.
known better advocate for myself. So I do like that we're doing this semester. It's giving me a little bit more because I'm very anxious about this. So
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that, Leanne. I wish I could take credit for it, but it goes to Dr. Carr and Dr. Nader Direct for coming up with that. I just pulled it together, but it was their idea. And I'm glad to hear that it's helping because that's exactly what we wanted to do. There's so many moving parts that if we can just take a little bit of time and talk about each one, it will help lower that temperature as you go into the agency and give you some tools that you can use as you start out.
thank you.
Mhm. Haley?
Hello. Hi, I just had a quick question about task supervisors. Are they supervisors that should be listed in IPT and should have access to assignments in IPT?
I believe they do. Dr. Carr, can you weigh in on that?
Yes, so your task supervisors, they don't necessarily have to have access to IPT, but if your practicum instructor feel like they just gonna do the bulk of everything and really need to just see what's in there, they can contact us and we can give them access. However, task supervisors cannot sign off on anything in IPT, so they can have that visual to see what's going on, but that practicum instructor will be the only one that can sign off on the documents. So if they want visual privileges, absolutely, we can make sure they have that. Your practicum instructor just needs to reach out to us and let us know, but they will still not be able to sign off on the documents. Only the practicum instructor will be able to do that.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was also thinking while Dr. Carr was sharing, it's like in my experience, when things start going south with a student and their placement, oftentimes it's because the student and the practicum instructor are not on the same page. It's like they're two ships passing in the night. And that kind of emphasizes the point of establishing that connection with your practicum instructor early, getting to know them getting to know you, and really, just like we do with our clients, we have to develop some rapport and some trust and some understanding that will open the door to further learning. So, do take that time, make that investment in, because you're going to be with them for the whole year, and a lot can be minimized or will not happen if we're able to do some of those things. I can't think of my words. Jasmine, did you have a question?
Yes, hello. I
Hi.
just had a I just had a quick question and I wanted to like piggyback. These are so helpful. Wasn't able to attend the one earlier, but I do plan on listening in. With that, I know communication is key and we've been talking a lot about that. Typically, when you're trying to get your hours, a lot of times that looks like twice a week. But if we don't necessarily work 8 hours a day, but we break it up throughout the week to where it does equal out to at least 16 or more hours. Is that okay as long as I'm on the same page with my site, supervisor and you, and I've communicated that? Is that okay for me to break it up however I need to throughout the week?
We understand. I know Dr. Carr would say, we want you to be in an agency for 8 hours, at a time. That's where you can like see from beginning to end everything that's going on in an agency. And so the extent to which you're able to, yes, but and Dr. Carr can correct me, we also understand that I've always said as long as the student and the practicum instructor are on the same page and are in agreement about it, that I personally, as a liaison, wouldn't have a problem with that. Dr.
Yeah.
Carr?
Yeah. As long as at the end of the day, which means at December 20th, you got those 230 hours if you're a BSW student or the 225 if you're an MSW student. That's what matters. So how you collect those hours, that's definitely between you and your organization, whatever you work out, that is totally fine. However you can make it happen, make it happen. Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all so much. Because I work in the evening, so I'm trying to map it out and I go to my practicum tomorrow. So I just kind of wanted to have like
Yep.
like idea of what we're about. So thank you all.
You're welcome. Allie, did you have a question still?
I do. Hello.
Hey.
Um, so I'm having a little bit of trouble with contacting my practicum instructor. I've been reached out to by it feels like just about everybody but her. The phone number on my IPT is her personal phone number, and when I reached out to her, she told me to contact her through an email that didn't match her name, and when I emailed, I got no response back. So I'm not really sure how to even get into contact with her if the personal phone number is not the way she wants to go, and I don't really have a contact route other than that.
Dr. Carr, what would you recommend?
Yeah, so I would go back and contact my placement assistant and work with the placement assistant to contact her and find out a way. Who is your placement assistant?
Me.
My placement assistant is Barbara or Mrs. or Dr. Hughes.
Yeah, so Barbara, I would contact them and kind of find out, what's going on with the organization and um with that practicum instructor and get a clear direction of how the student is supposed to contact them moving forward, because that's very important. How and then how they would like to be contacted and make sure that they respond to the
Right.
student when they do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Allie, you had brought that to my attention a while ago, and I guess I thought it had been resolved, but apparently not. So let's circle back separately and we'll work on
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
I kind of thought it had been resolved too
Yeah.
until today's meeting stressed the importance of the instructor. I've been being contacted by their HR person for most of
Hmm.
the information that I've gotten, but I have yet to speak to my instructor herself. So, all right.
Okay. All right.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you so
Allie.
much.
You bet.
When can we expect to hear from our liaison?
Dr. Carr?
You should have heard from your liaison already. Um, like I said, this morning and yesterday, liaison should have already approached students. If you have not heard from so first let me tell you how to find out who your liaison is. If you have not heard from your liaison, if you go on IPT, right under your birthday in IPT, there is a name and it says liaison. That is who your liaison is. So you know who they are, and you can contact them. Each liaison has a Wayne State email, so you should be able to look them up and email them. If you do not have any name there, then you can contact the office, the Practicum office, or you can contact me directly. Shoot me an email. Hey, Dr. Carr, I do not have a liaison, or please let me know who my liaison is, and I'm happy to give you that information. But you should have already heard from your liaison by this point. But if no one is there, no name is there, then let me know.
A name's there. I just haven't heard from her. I don't know how to pronounce her first name. I apologize, but
Aloha.
it's
Aloha. It's Aloha Van Camp.
Aloha. It is Aloha.
Hmm.
Okay, I
Hmm.
wasn't sure. Van Camp. So I have not heard from her yet, but I can certainly reach out to her. Not an issue.
Absolutely. You can reach out to her if you like.
Thank you.
Any other questions, clarifications that we can help with? Oh, I know. Oh, I remember I said earlier, I couldn't remember what I was going to think because we were talking about how, sometimes learning is slow at the beginning and students don't feel like they're really making any progress. I've been a liaison for a lot of years and I make that fall mid-semester site visit and I visit with the student and the practicum liaison and talk about what you've been doing and as students, you're still a little bit like a deer in headlights, not quite sure what's going on. But every single time when I come back in winter semester at midpoint, the students are completely different people because all of a sudden, everything has opened up. The dots are being connected, the lights are going on, responsibilities are now making sense. It's like you will You will grow and develop. It's like a butterfly, coming out of a cocoon. And over time, because of your experiences, you're going to develop into this nice, rich learning experience. I love seeing that. Jamie?
Good afternoon. I do have a question. I
Mhm.
missed this morning's boot camp session, and I know that when you miss them, you have to do a test. And I just had a question in regards to where I can find the test for this morning.
Jamie, are you BSW or MSW Foundation?
MSW Foundation.
That's what I thought. So Social Work 7998 is your practicum course.
Mhm.
Once the video or the recordings of these sessions are uploaded and available in your class, Dr. Carr will let you know, and then you can go in and view the session, and then there's going to be a quiz in that same module. They're just not available yet.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I will say, Dr. Hughes, I'm hearing some of the anxiety around the beginning of the school year, and I will tell you that as a practicum instructor, I have that same anxiety, right? So
Mhm.
at CNS, I interview the student and I pass the student on to HR, and HR does all this thing, and I'm in the background like, when is my student coming? When is my student? Can I talk to my student? They're like, hold off, Carlin, I've got to do this. So there's HR, 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 and then there's onboarding, and then there's IT, giving them their email. Like it's just crazy making at the beginning of the semester, I tell you. So I say all that to say that the field, the practicum instructors and organizations are scrambling just like the university and the students are. And we're gonna all figure it out together. We usually do.
That's a great way to end it. Thank you, Carlin, for your time. Thank you, Dr. Carr. Good to see everybody again. You know how to reach out. Communication is key. Have a good rest of your week.
Thank you so much, everybody.